Hey, what's going on, everybody? How y'all doing today? First, I would like to ask y'all to please like, subscribe, and share some of these videos with your friends and your loved ones. They definitely need this too. Don't leave me hanging by having to simply depend on those that I come in contact with. Help me get this page up and rocking. So, in this right here, this is going to be a simple video. This page comes out of the Yamasi Indians, Florida to South Carolina, and is speaking about a Spaniard that was reporting Lamasis. Now, the first person that I actually seen use that term Lamasi, I found it in like the 1600s. It was actually in a document. It was on a census, but it says that the Lamasi in other nations of the interior were tall and morenos, dark skinned. Now, also in this book, what you will find is that some Guale, like King Hashpa, right, or Joshpo or Hashpach, his family and his people also considered Pardo y Moreno. I have that in another video where they're calling the Yamasi blacks and browns. That's the way that they were describing these people by color. Now, and this is called the Reminiscence. It's by Tom. I think it's by Thomas Woodward. I'm definitely not mistaken. It's a lot of notes or a lot of different letters in here. But one of the guys that's writing to him is explaining about the Yamasi, and he says he describes the Yamasi as having dark skin, coarse hair, thick lips, and flat feet, and having inferior implements of war to the Creeks. Now, that was very interesting because what we do know is, as they term it here, that there was a war of extermination, right? And it was waged by the Creeks against the Yamasi. Now, what's not often talked about is that there are some Cherokee that have Yamasi fathers, Cherokee mothers that decided not to help the Creeks with that. But we'll touch on that in a couple moments. Now, here in the sketch of Seminole Wars, it's explaining that it says East Florida was the original possession of the ancient Yamasis, who also owned a portion of Carolina. Now, here it says that the Yamasis had a warlike spirit. This is where the story differs between who you're getting it from, and here's what I mean. Some people will teach it that the Yamasi were gentle because it means gentle. That was the original group of Yamasi because they chose not to fight. But when the original group of Yamasi joined the Muskogee, they became warlike just like the Muskogee, which made the majority of that original Yamasi have to incorporate into the Muskogee Nation. Now, in the next page, it's talking about the Okleveha or the Oklewaha, as they put it here. But the Oklewaha tribe of Seminoles are thought to be descendants of the Yamasis, as they are blacker than other tribes, and the Yamasis are said to have been remarkably dark complexion. So we have the idea, okay, the Yamasi are black, brown, they're dark skinned, tall, coarse hair, thick lips, moon eyes. This is what they say. Now, who are the Yamasi made up of? So, it says that many of these Tama refugees settled on the coastal islands located between Guale missions and St. Augustine. In both Guale Apache, these Tama refugees were referred to as Yamasis. Now, I also showed this in the anthropology book. In the anthropology book, it explains that the Guale were already here. The Mokoma were already here. However, when the interior people came in, the original interior people, we're not talking about the Muskogee coming into the interior and making it to the islands. We're talking about the original interior people. Everyone was classified under the Yamasi name according to Englishmen, being that Englishmen set up their reservation for the Yamasi to defend them. The Spanish were still calling them Guale in 1680, 1690. Even in 1730 and 1750, we still have documents of original Guale. So here, it's explaining the same thing. It's talking about So, they became known as Yamasi. Now, here's a description. This actually can be found in the U.S. Congressional Record, 1901, where it's talking about the Yamasi. It says that the Yamasi Indians were Negroes, what were known afterwards as the fiercest of the Indian tribes of the South. The well-known Yamasi Indians were Africans. Now, here goes someone that's a part of the Confederacy. The reason Yamasi are considered Africans is because they had dark skin, coarse hair, thick lips, and flat feet. However, these people were not originally African. They may have been quote unquote Negro or Negroid according to European standards, but that didn't make them African. What some Spaniards would say is that they're Ethiopian-like or not unlike the Ethiopians. This is a term that the saying that they were using. Now, the reason they had to consider these people to be Africans is because the Yamasi broke off into different groups, like the Gullah, the Geechee, the Gullah Geechee, right? The Seminole. You see what I'm saying? The Negro Seminole, the Gullah Seminole, the Geechee. So the Yamasi was made up of so many groups, and then it broke back down into a lot of groups. So in order to do away with Yamasi history, the people, right, the man had to do away with the name, just like they did with Guale. Now here, we're going over an author, he's explaining that, he's talking about the Hichiti and the Muskogee. Now he says that, I have mentioned, but mostly Hichitis and Creeks. The Hichitis have by the whites, been looked upon as being the original Muskogees, but they are not. They were not. They had an entirely different language of their own, and were in the country when the Creeks first entered. Think about that. When the Creeks entered the East, they claimed the Hichiti was already there. But here's the thing: Hichiti is a Muskogee word, so the Hichiti couldn't have been in the East until the Muskogee got there. Listen to what I'm saying. The Hichiti cannot have been in the East until the Muskogee have gotten there. So if you say Okiichi and Ogeechee, right, and that's Okihichiti or Okiichi, then someone that spoke Muskogee had to give that term to that place. Or someone that was speaking the dialects of Hichiti, like the Miccosukee. Because we can't forget the Miccosukee was in the north before they got multiple migrations and waves. So Hichiti comes from Muskogee, but then you find out that, hey, no wonder these things are actually the same. So this is talking about the families. It says, years ago, you could not find an Indian in the nation, but could tell you his family. This is like today. You can't find Indians in the nation, really. Not the original Indians, but they will tell you who their family is. It says, but whiskey has destroyed many of their old customs as well as the Indians themselves. That's literally what it did. All our fucking grandpas are drunks. Their fucking grandpas are drunks, and their grandpas are drunks, and right? And if your grandpa wasn't a drunk, he was an alkie. And if he wasn't an alkie, it's because he's seen the effects of what it did to his family. Now, here it's talking about the Muskogee. It says that the Muskogees, from their own account, made a short stay on the Mississippi or its waters. They immigrated to Alabama and Georgia and settled mostly on large creeks and rivers near the falls and shores, blah, 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 all of that. So we know that they're not originally from here. This is what we know. Now, this is from William and Mary. These are some things that are interesting. I don't agree with everything in every book, but I agree with some with a lot that's in here. And some things, the things that I don't, I will have to explain myself so it can make sense for those who don't live it. Okay. Now, it says Yamasis moved into these Guale and Mocoma provinces, paid tribute to at least one Mocoma leader, adopted Guale and Mocoma ceremonic techniques, outnumbered their populations, and contributed contributed the most to the Spanish labor drive, the reprimendo, right? It says, given the distances between Guale, Mocoma, and Yamasi towns, their shared ceremonic practices likely represented not learning directly shared, but instead indirect social connections. Are you not catching this? If you're not catching this, right, let me tell you what's going on. See, when the Yamasi came amongst these people, a lot of these things they adopted from these people, like I've been explaining months and weeks ago. These are things that I also said about the Creeks. When the Creeks came to the Southeast, they began to adopt the practices of the people from the Southeast. This is why some tell it that the Muskogee were not practicing green corn until they got here. This is why Swift Creek culture blew up. Because if you look at the original culture, it was literally on the coast, the Depth Fork culture. It was on the coast. And then it grew to the interior. Why? Because do the Asakata not say they come from a place where it was ice and they traveled down? And then the Muskogee or different groups of Muskogee say how they come out of the mounds and mountains and caves and traveled to the east. But the Guale and the Toshia, right, the Yuchi, they already tell you that they've been here. They come from the water and the sky. But the people that come from the earth tell you that they came to the east. You have to catch these things. Now, he's going over something. He says he's going with documents, right? So documents demonstrate how frequently Yamasi spoke multiple languages, including their own Spanish, Hichiti, Kashada, Muskogee, and Cherokee. So they had their own dialect that was not considered Muskogee or Hichiti when they were originally speaking their own language. But it's going to get a little deeper for you. It says the Yamasi spoke Native American languages of the interior rather than Appalachian, Guale, and Tacoma languages of Spanish Florida. But do you know why? It's because they weren't originally from the coast. They're not a coastal people. They end up adopting the languages of all these people because what? The Yamasi consisted of all of these different groups. You had Hichiti speakers, Kashida speakers, Muskogee speakers, and Cherokee speakers that were considered Yamasi. You also had Yamasi speakers, right? But then you had the Guale speakers, and the majority of the Guale became known as Yamasi. So then that would classify Guale as being Yamasi, or then you would be able to say Yamasi spoke Guale because the Guale became Yamasi. So it can make sense if it's being taught properly. But when people have a goal to keep themselves in power, they're not going to tell you all of this. They're not going to give it all to you how it actually is. So it goes on to tell you Yamasi learned Spanish and worked as translators, diplomats, and messengers for the languages of the interior. That's an actual fact. But one Yamasi that was able to speak Guale was King Hashpas or King Hashpo or Miku Don Francisco Antonio, right? Huh? Nobody know about Miku Don Francisco Antonio. M. Alotsi, right? M. Portucaligo. Wale. Or de. You feel me? This for sure. This got to be in your blood for you to teach it how it is. So these are pottery. This is different potteries. You know, you see the stamps. This is where we get real. If you're watching the video to this point, I love you, man. Send this video out because here go the daggers. So y'all ain't hear me say dagger the whole time. Here go the daggers. Now, going back to the beginning, this is the relationship between the Yamasi and the Cherokee. With the war of extermination that was going on, many Cherokee, or I have 3 Cherokee leaders notated that decided not to go to war against the Yamasi because those are their ancient people. One of these is Caesar Augustus. And it says Yamase-Cherokee, king of Indians, right? And it says that are not typical Southeastern titles such as warrior, this. But if you know this man's story, you know that his father was Yamasi, mother Cherokee. Reason, his mother became a part of said nation, right? Now, further down it says Yamase-Cherokee is an intriguing title as well, reflecting a lateral mixed heritage of Yamasi and Cherokee parents, an ability to speak for both Yamasi and Cherokee individuals, or other social connections between these two groups. Such 18th century connections between the Yamasi and Cherokees were not unusual. Other document connections include a Cherokee leader, a long warrior of Tunisi, who called British-sponsored attacks on Guale and Guale and Macomb provinces. Basically, he shitted on them. He wasn't fucking with them. You see what I'm saying? However, now this same man called the Yamasis his ancient people. This is where I was going. He called the Yamasis his ancient people, and not only did he do that, but also Charity Hagi. Charity Hagi is a Cherokee chief. They call him a shaman. Now, here's another dagger, right? This is a land grant with names and marks of Southeastern Native American leaders. This is what it says. It was actually from 1783. Now, I have the whole, but it says names and family marks. So here are their written names, but here are their clans. You have Snake Clan. It's so lit. This is like a Pokeball, don't it? It reminds you of something from the Mayans, kind of, right? You have your birds that are like some form of a cat. You have a bird, you see what I'm saying? Or an arrow. That looks like an arrow to me. You get not an arrow, you know what I mean? Or a bow, excuse me. You have other animals. That shit, I don't know what this is. Watch this. Let me see. Where we at? I don't know what this is, bro. That's a dinosaur. Y'all can say what y'all want to say. This might have, I don't know what this is. Probably an alligator or some shit. But they had symbols for family names, which means that these people, not to say that they had a for sure written language, but they knew how to communicate with symbols. They had pictographs. They had a culture. Now, furthering the point of the culture, I want you all to look at this tattoo of Tomochichi. And this is his nephew's son, what they call him, right? We know what happened to him. We're not going to go into it. But notice that that same tattoo is a tattoo that was documented on Caesar Augustus. Yeah. Look at it. This is beautiful. It shows you how the Yamasi, the Cherokee, even Guale, shared great practices, but it doesn't make them the same people. So you can have respect and reverence for one, and you can give respect and reverence and veneration to all, but you also have to make sure that you venerate your own. Here's the dagger. A Yuchi man with the same tap. We know that the Toshiyaha and the Guale were here before the Muskogee and the Yamasi, but the Yamasi were able to pick up all these different ceremonial practices. The Muskogees were able to pick up all these different ceremonial practices. So when they start practicing them for the Europeans looked at them as this is what's original, as opposed to the families that were not dealing with Europeans and or that kept their tradition sacred. See, some had to revitalize them because what did it say? You had Indians who weren't even in the nations, but they could name their families. But then there are also people that will tell you, hey, it's you wrong for trying to revitalize your culture. You're wrong for bringing your family together and creating your dances, creating your ceremonies, having your elders and the shamans that may practice different traditions like Ifa, rebuild rituals and spirit in your spiritual system. You have people that will tell you that you are wrong. So with that being said, ignore the messages that were popping up. Y'all will be all right. Share this with your friends. Thank you.